But first tonight at 6, nearly 43,000 people signed the petition. Now 4 residents are filing a lawsuit, all to make sure the recall election happens soon. For Jackson County Executive Frank White.
Right now, the election is set for August 26th, which is less than 60 days away. Frank White says the recall isn't about accountability. In a statement today, he writes in part, it's about clearing the path for a stadium deal that voters rejected and removing the one person who stood up and said it was a bad deal for taxpayers.
Well, at least one person on the lawsuit disagrees. We shared the voice of Stephanie Cohen yesterday. Not only is she listed on today's lawsuit, she helped to collect thousands of signatures for the recall petition.
Well, I'll tell you this, I didn't know anything at all about the stadium taxes when I opened my bill in early July of 23 and saw my excessive taxes. But I know it hit people's pocketbooks and their mental state.
She tells us at the end of the day, the county executive is responsible for what happens in the county.
So what happens next? Today's lawsuit is about making sure the special election happens next month. KSHB 41 Sarah Plague shares the voices of 2 election board members to understand why the board and residents are concerned the election won't happen next month.
Now that the Jackson County Legislature set an election in motion that would ask voters whether to recall County Executive Frank White, the clock is ticking.
The charter says shall. We don't have a choice. We shall have an election within 60 days.
Even last week, election board officials were feeling the time crunch.
Oh, right now it's chaos.
Pushing us past what our limits are normally.
Usually needing 70 days to put on an election, the Jackson County and Kansas City election authorities are dealing with a 60-day time constraint.
We usually have a nice little 4-week period from the time of certification to the time we have to have the ballot ready. Now that is cut within less than a week, and we're sort of struggling coming up with polling places.
Trying to squeeze all that in a week's time or less than a week's time is very difficult, especially for 103 polls and for 263,000 voters. When there's an election in November, is it possible that we could get it pushed to November? That would be more ideal.
That sentiment points to an issue Frank White himself brought up, saying the election violates this ordinance. The ordinance says, quote, if no legal election date is available within 60 days, the election will occur at the next available election. But a lawsuit filed by Jackson County voters on Wednesday is asking a judge to direct the election boards to, quote, immediately schedule and begin efforts to hold an election on August 26th. Frank White has until July 18th to veto the recall election ordinance the legislature passed. The legislature also passed a resolution which White cannot veto. Late Wednesday afternoon, Frank White issued a statement in response to that lawsuit saying it's about, quote, politics, personal power grabs, wasted taxpayer dollars, and stadium subsidies. One of the people who filed the lawsuit told KSHB this week that this recall election has nothing to do with the Royals and Chiefs. For her, it's about skyrocketing property assessments. I'm Sarah Plague, KSHB 41 News.